The message came at midnight, Earth time. Commander Yar-Chun sat alone in her small cabin on the UES Perseverance, reading the words on her screen for the third time. The letters glowed soft blue in the darkness. She did not move. She barely breathed. Operation Socked was now active. One of their people had disappeared. Yara had served in the United Earth Fleet for 22 years. She had seen friends die in the vacuum of space. She had walked on worlds where the air burned her lungs and the ground tried to swallow her whole. But this message made her feel something she had not felt in a long time. Fear. Not for herself. For the man who was lost somewhere in enemy territory, alone and hunted. His name was David Okonkwo, but everyone called him Mark. He had been working undercover in Kalori space for 3 years. The Kalori were one of the most powerful species in the galaxy. They had 4 arms, skin like gray stone, and eyes that could see in complete darkness. They believed themselves to be the masters of all living things. They looked at humans the way humans might look at insects. Mark had been placed inside their most secret research facility. His mission was simple but dangerous. The Kalori had stolen something from Earth. They had taken research data about human biology. They wanted to understand why humans could do things that other species could not. They wanted to know the secret of human endurance. Every species in the galaxy had an endurance mark. It was a number that told everyone how long that species could survive in hard conditions. How long could they go without water? How much pain could they handle? How far could they walk before their bodies failed? Humans had a rating of 7.2. It was not impressive. Many species had higher numbers. The Kalori themselves were rated at 8.9, but the numbers were wrong. The Galactic Concord, the great council that governed all known species, had made a mistake. They had measured human bodies. They had tested human muscles and bones and blood. But they had not measured the one thing that made humans different from every other creature in the stars. They had not measured the human will. Mark knew the truth. He had stolen it back from the Kalori, copied onto a small data core no bigger than his thumb. Then he had run. He had escaped the facility using methods that should have killed him. He had crawled through maintenance tunnels filled with toxic gas. He had jumped from a transport ship into the cold emptiness of space, trusting that a rescue pod would catch him before he froze to death. It had caught him with 4 seconds to spare, and then he had vanished. His last transmission was 12 words long. Package secure. Going dark. Singing wastes. They will not follow. The singing wastes. Yara closed her eyes and let out a slow breath. She knew that place. Everyone knew that place. It was a moon in the outer reaches of Kalori space. A desert world where the temperature rose to boiling during the day and dropped far below freezing at night. The winds there made strange sounds as they moved through the ancient rock formations. Some species said the sounds drove people mad. Others said the moon was haunted by the ghosts of everyone who had ever died there. Many had died there. No Kalori search party had ever returned from the deep wastes. Mark had gone there on purpose. He knew the Kalori would not follow him into that hell. He also knew that his own people would. Because humans were different. Humans did not stop. Iris stood up and walked to her door. The ship was quiet at this hour. Most of her crew was sleeping. The Perseverance was a small vessel, built for speed and silence rather than comfort. It carried a crew of 32 humans, each one selected for a very specific reason. They were not the strongest humans. They were not the smartest or the fastest. They were the most stubborn, the most determined, the ones who would keep walking when their legs screamed for rest. The ones who would keep breathing when their lungs burned with every breath. The ones who would never, ever give up. Yara found her second in command, Lieutenant Commander James Obi, in the small kitchen. He was drinking tea and reading an old paper book. Real paper was rare now, but James liked the feel of it in his hands. He looked up when she entered. "We have orders," Yara said. James put down his book. He did not ask what kind of orders. He could see the answer in her eyes. "When do we leave?" "Now. Wake the crew. Tell them to prepare for a long walk." James smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who knew that hard times were coming and welcomed them anyway. "How long?" "However long it takes." The crew assembled in the main hold within 20 minutes. 31 humans stood in neat rows, their faces calm and ready. Yara looked at each of them in turn. She saw farmers and scientists, soldiers and teachers. She saw people who had grown up on Earth and people who had been born on distant colony worlds. But they all had one thing in common. They were human, and that meant something. "One of our own is lost," Yara said. Her voice was steady and clear. "He is somewhere in the singing wastes, carrying information that could change everything for our species. The Kalori will not go after him. They are too afraid of that place. But we are not afraid. We are going to bring him home." No one asked how far they would have to go. No one asked about the dangers. No one asked if they might die. They all knew the answers already. "We will cross into Kalori space using the Voros Nebula," Yara continued. 3 weeks of silent drift through heavy radiation. Our shields will protect us, but only barely. It will not be comfortable. The Kalori believe nothing can survive that crossing. They are wrong. A young woman in the front row raised her hand. Her name was Priya Sharma, and she was the ship's doctor. "Commander, what if Mark is already dead when we get there?" Yara looked at her with hard eyes. "Then we bring his body home. And we bring the data core. And we make sure the galaxy knows that humans do not abandon their own. Ever." The crew nodded. That was enough. That was all they needed to hear. The Perseverance turned toward the Voros Nebula and began its long journey into the unknown. Behind them, Earth grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared among the countless stars. Ahead of them lay radiation, enemy territory, and a desert moon where the wind sang songs of death. None of them looked back. Humans never did. The Voros Nebula was beautiful and deadly. Great clouds of purple and red gas stretched across space like the arms of a sleeping giant. Hidden inside those colorful clouds were particles of radiation that could kill most living things in minutes. Ships that entered the nebula needed strong shields and fast engines. They needed to get through quickly before the radiation broke through their defenses. The Perseverance had neither strong shields nor fast engines. It had something else. It had a crew that refused to accept the rules that the galaxy had written. "Commander," Yara Chun ordered all non-essential systems shut down. The lights went dark. The heating systems went cold. Even the artificial gravity was reduced to save power. Every bit of energy the ship had went into one thing: the radiation shields. For 3 weeks, the crew lived in near darkness. They wore thick clothing to stay warm. They ate cold food because the cooking systems were offline. They slept in shifts, huddled together for warmth like their ancestors had done thousands of years ago. Around dying fires, the radiation still got through. Not much, but enough. Everyone on board felt sick. Their heads hurt. Their stomachs turned. Some of them bled from their noses and gums. Dr. Priya Sharma moved from person to person, giving them medicine and kind words. She told them their bodies would heal once they left the nebula. She told them they were strong enough to survive this. She was right. On the 19th day, the Perseverance slipped out of the Voros Nebula and into Kalori space. No alarms sounded. No enemy ships came to investigate. The Kalori had sensors watching every normal entry point into their territory. But they did not watch the nebula. They believed nothing could survive that crossing. They did not understand humans. The ship made its way to Threshold Station, a trading post on the edge of Kalori space. Threshold was a lawless place where criminals and merchants from 100 worlds came to do business. The Kalori allowed it to exist because it was useful. Information flowed through Threshold like water through a river. If you wanted to know something, you could find the answer there. For a price, Yara took a small team down to the station. She brought James, Priya, and 2 security officers named Hassan and Wei. They wore plain clothes and carried hidden weapons. They looked like ordinary traders, tired and dirty from a long journey. No one looked at them twice. The station was crowded and loud. Aliens of every shape and size moved through the narrow corridors. Some walked on 2 legs. Some walked on 4 or 6 or 8. Some did not walk at all but floated through the air on wings or anti-gravity devices. The smell was terrible, a mix of 100 different bodies and 1,000 different foods. Yara found what she was looking for in a small bar near the station center. A Kalori sat alone at a corner table, his gray skin marked with old scars. His forearms were wrapped around a large drink, and his dark eyes watched everything with the look of someone who had seen too much. His name was Varath, and he had once been a high-ranking officer in the Kalori military. Now he was a trader, selling information to anyone who would pay. Yara had been given his name before leaving Earth. She sat down across from him without asking permission. "I am looking for a human," she said in the common trade language. "He went into the singing wastes about 4 weeks ago." Varath's mandibles clicked together, a sound that might have been laughter. "Many have looked for this human. None have found him." The Kalori sent 3 search parties into the wastes. 40 soldiers. Good soldiers. Strong soldiers. What happened to them? They died. Varath took a long drink from his glass. The wastes killed them. Heat. Cold. Thirst. The singing wind that breaks the mind. Your human chose his hiding place well. Yara leaned forward. "But he is alive?" "I believe so. My sources say the search parties found signs of him. Footprints. A small fire. But they could never catch him. He kept moving. Always moving. He walked through conditions that should have killed him 10 times over. The Kalori commanders could not understand it. They wrote reports about it. I have seen these reports. What did they say?" Varath set down his drink and looked at Yara with something that might have been respect. Or fear. "They called your species the species that does not stop. They said your human walked for days without water and heat that would boil Kalori blood. They said he climbed mountains at night when the cold would freeze our flesh solid. They said he did not seem to feel pain the way normal creatures do." "He felt it," Yara said quietly. "He just did not let it stop him." Varath nodded slowly. "This is what frightens my people. We are stronger than you. Faster than you. We live longer than you. But there is something in humans that we do not have. Something we cannot understand. Your bodies should fail, but they do not. Your minds should break, but they do not. You just keep walking." James spoke up from behind Yara. "Where exactly in the waste did they last see him?" Varath pulled out a small device and projected a map onto the table. It showed the moon known as the Singing Wastes. Most of it was marked in red, meaning extreme danger. A small area near the northern pole was marked in orange, meaning only regular danger. Varath pointed to a spot deep in the red zone. "Here, near the ruins of an old civilization. Nobody knows who built those ruins. They have been empty for 1,000,000 years. Of alien years. Your human was heading there when the last search party lost his trail. 3 days later, that search party was dead." Yara studied the map. The distance from the nearest landing zone to the ruins was over 400 kilometers. 400 kilometers of burning days and freezing nights. 400 kilometers of singing wind and no water. 400 kilometers of death. Can we land closer? She asked. No. Kalori patrol ships watch the area. They will shoot down any vessel that comes within 200 kilometers of those ruins. You would have to walk. Yara looked at James. James looked back. Neither of them smiled, but something passed between them. An understanding. A decision. Thank you for your help, Yara said to Varth. She placed a credit chip on the table. Enough money to keep him comfortable for a year. Varth picked up the chip and made it disappear into his clothing. You are going then? Into the wastes? Yes, you will die. Yara stood up. Her team stood with her. Perhaps, but we will keep walking until we do. She left the bar without looking back. Behind her, Vorith watched them go. He had met many species in his long life. He had seen warriors and cowards, heroes and monsters. But he had never seen anything quite like these strange, fragile creatures from the small blue world called Earth. They were not strong. They were not fast. They were not impressive in any way that the galaxy understood. But there was something in their eyes that made Varth shiver. Something old. Something hungry. Something that would not stop until it found what it was looking for. For the first time in many years, Vorith felt sorry for his own people. They had made an enemy of the species that does not stop. They did not yet understand what that meant, but they would learn. The singing wastes earned their name from the sound the wind made as it moved through the ancient rocks. It was not a pleasant sound. It was high and low at the same time, like 1,000 voices crying out in pain. Some species went mad within hours of hearing it. Their minds simply could not handle the noise. They would tear at their own ears, trying to make it stop. The humans wrapped cloth around their heads and kept walking. Commander, Yara Chen led a team of 12 into the wastes. She had wanted to bring more, but the landing zone could only hold one small shuttle, and they needed to leave people behind to guard it. The 12 who came were volunteers. Every single member of the crew had volunteered. Yara had to choose the ones most likely to survive. They landed at dawn, when the temperature was almost bearable. They had 8 hours before the sun reached its peak, and the ground became hot enough to melt their boots. They walked fast, covering as much distance as possible before they would need to find shelter. The land around them was dead. Nothing grew here. Nothing lived here. The ground was cracked and dry, painted in shades of orange and brown. Strange rock formations rose up like the bones of giant animals. The sky was a pale yellow color, filled with dust that never settled. By midday, they had covered 30 kilometers. The heat was becoming dangerous. Yara found a shallow cave in the side of a rock formation and ordered everyone inside. They pressed themselves against the cool stone walls and waited. Outside, the temperature rose to levels that would kill a human in minutes. They drank small amounts of water. They ate protein bars that tasted like cardboard. They did not complain. There was nothing to complain about. This was simply what needed to be done. When the sun began to set, the temperature dropped fast. Within an hour, it was below freezing. They put on thermal suits and kept walking. The nights were almost as dangerous as the days. The cold was bitter and deep. It cut through their clothing and tried to freeze their blood. But humans had evolved on a planet with harsh winters. Their bodies knew how to generate heat. They moved their arms and legs. They breathed deeply. They kept their blood flowing through sheer force of will. On the second day, they found the first Kalori bodies. There were 6 of them, huddled together in a small depression in the ground. Their gray skin had turned black from the sun. Their forearms were wrapped around themselves, frozen in death. They had died from heat exposure, unable to regulate their body temperature in conditions their species was not designed to handle. Priya examined the bodies quickly. They have been dead about 2 weeks. They made it farther than I expected. They were strong, Yara said. But strength is not enough here. Hassan, one of the security officers, looked at the dead Kalori with something like pity. Should we bury them? Yara thought for a moment. Yes, they were enemies, but they were soldiers doing their duty. They deserve respect. They dug shallow graves in the hard ground. It took precious time and energy, but no one argued. When they were done, James said a few words in a language none of the Kalori would have understood. It did not matter. The words were not for them. They were for the humans, to remind themselves that they were still civilized, still capable of kindness. Even here, even now, they walked on. On the 4th day, they found more bodies. 12 this time. These had died from the cold, their bodies frozen solid during the night. They must have run out of heating packs. They must have thought they could survive without them. They were wrong. Yara did not order burials this time. They did not have the strength. The singing of the wind grew louder as they moved deeper into the wastes. Some of the team began to hear words in the sound. Voices calling their names. Promises of water and rest if they would just lie down and sleep. These were lies, of course. Tricks of the exhausted mind. But knowing they were lies did not make them easier to ignore. Wei, the other security officer, started talking to people who were not there. She was having conversations with her dead mother, who had passed away 10 years ago. Priya gave her medicine that helped, but everyone knew it was only a temporary fix. If they did not get out of the waste soon, Wei's mind might not recover. On the 5th day, they ran low on water. They had planned for this. They had brought water recyclers that could extract moisture from their own sweat and breath. It was not pleasant, drinking water that had come from your own body, but it kept them alive. The recyclers gave them just enough to continue. No more. On the 6th day, they found Mark. The ancient ruins rose up from the desert like the skeleton of a dead city. Massive stone columns stood in crooked rows. Walls that had once held up great buildings now lay broken on the ground. Nobody knew who had built this place. Nobody knew why they had left. The ruins had been empty for so long that even their ghosts had forgotten why they were sad. Mark was inside the largest remaining structure, a half-collapsed temple of some kind. He lay on the stone floor, his eyes closed, his breathing shallow. He was alive, but barely. His skin was burned and peeling. His lips were cracked and bleeding. He had lost so much weight that his bones showed through his flesh, but his hands were still wrapped tight around the small data core. Even in his sleep, even half dead from thirst and heat and exhaustion, he had not let go of his mission. Priya rushed to his side and began working. She gave him water through a tube. She treated his burns and his wounds. She pumped his body full of nutrients and medicine. The rest of the team stood around them, watching and waiting. After an hour, Mark opened his eyes. He looked up at Yara and smiled. It was a terrible smile, the smile of a man who had walked through hell and come out the other side. "Took you long enough," he whispered. Wyatt and knelt down beside him. "We walked. We always walk." Mark's smile grew wider. "I knew you would come. That is why I came here. Because I knew the Kalori would never make it. But humans would. What is on the data core?" Yara asked. Mark held up the small device. It seemed so tiny, so simple. Hard to believe it was worth dying for. "The truth," Mark said. "The truth about what makes us different. The Kalori stole our research. They thought they could copy it. They thought they could make themselves like us. But they failed. They will always fail. Why?" Mark closed his eyes again. He was fading, his body finally giving in to exhaustion now that his mission was complete. "Because endurance is not in the body," he whispered. "It is in the choice. The choice to keep going when everything tells you to stop. That cannot be copied. That cannot be stolen. It can only be lived. He fell unconscious, the data core still clutched in his hand. Yara looked at her team. They were exhausted. They were hurt. They were running out of supplies. And they still had 400 kilometers to walk before they reached safety. Rest for 2 hours, she said. Then we start back. Nobody argued. Nobody asked if it was possible. They all knew the answer did not matter. They were going to walk out of the singing wastes, carrying their wounded brother, or they were going to die trying. There was no other option. There never had been. The walk back was worse than the walk in. They had less water now, less food, less medicine, and they had to carry Mark on a stretcher made from thermal blankets and metal poles taken from the ruins. 4 people carried him at a time, switching out every hour. The extra weight slowed them down. The extra effort drained their strength. Commander Yara Chun calculated the numbers in her head as they walked. 400 kilometers. 6 days to get in. They would need at least 8 days to get out, moving slower with their burden. But their supplies would only last 7 days. Maybe 7.5 if they cut rations even further. She did not share these numbers with her team. They already knew. They could all do the math. But knowing the math did not change anything. They were still going to try. On the 2nd day of the return journey, Hassan collapsed. He was carrying the front of the stretcher when his legs simply stopped working. He fell forward onto his face and did not get up. Priya rushed to him and found that his heart was beating too fast. His body had pushed itself past its limits. If he tried to walk any further, his heart would give out. They could not carry 2 people. They barely had enough strength to carry one. Hassan knew this. He looked up at Yara with calm eyes and said, "Leave me. I will slow you down. Come back for me after you reach the shuttle." "No," Yara said. "Commander, please. Be reasonable." "I am being reasonable. We do not leave our people behind. Ever." Hassan tried to argue, but Yara would not listen. She ordered Wei and James to help Hassan walk. They supported him between them, one arm over each shoulder. It slowed them down even more. But they kept moving. On the 3rd day, their water recyclers began to fail. The dessert dust had gotten into the machines. One by one, they stopped working. By the end of the day, only 2 recyclers were still functioning. 12 people sharing 2 recyclers. They cut their water intake to dangerous levels. Just enough to keep their kidneys working. Just enough to keep their blood flowing. Their mouths became dry as sand. Their tongues swelled. Speaking became painful, so they stopped speaking. They saved their moisture for breathing. On the 4th day, they reached the midpoint. 200 kilometers behind them. 200 kilometers ahead. Yara let them rest for 4 hours instead of 2. It was a risk. They were burning time they did not have. But she could see that some of her people were near the breaking point. A few hours of rest might save lives. That night, as they huddled together for warmth, Mark woke up. He was still weak, but the medicine had done its work. He could think clearly now. He could see what was happening around him. "You should not have come for me," he whispered to Yara. "You would have done the same for us. That does not make it right. I knew the risks when I chose the wastes. I did not want anyone else to die from my choice." Yara looked at him in the darkness. The singing wind howled around them, cold and hungry. "We are not dying for your choice," she said. "We are dying for our own. Each person here chose to come. Each person here chose to keep walking. That is what humans do. We choose." Mark was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "The data on the core. It explains everything. Why we can do what we do. Why no other species can copy it. Tell me." "Our ancestors were persistence hunters. Do you know what that means? Yara nodded. She had learned this in school long ago. They chased animals until the animals died from exhaustion. Not faster. Not stronger. Just longer. Yes, we evolved to never stop. Our bodies cool themselves through sweat. Our legs are designed for walking, not running. We are the best long-distance travelers in the known galaxy. No other species has this gift. But that is just biology. The Kalori could have learned that. Mark shook his head slowly. It is more than biology. It is psychology. Our minds have a special ability. We can override our own biological limits. We can tell our bodies to keep going when our bodies are screaming to stop. We can choose to ignore pain. We can choose to ignore exhaustion. We can choose to die on our feet rather than live on our knees. And the Kalori cannot do this? No species can do this. We have tested hundreds of species across the galaxy. None of them have this ability. When their bodies say stop, they stop. When their minds say quit, they quit. Only humans can push past that wall. Only humans can choose to keep walking into the fire. Yara thought about her team. About Hassan, who had wanted to be left behind, but kept walking because she told him to. About Wei, who heard voices in the wind but refused to lie down and die. About all of them, slowly killing themselves to carry one man home. That is why the Kalori are afraid of us, she said. Yes, they realize they cannot beat us. Not in a war of endurance. They can win battles. They can win campaigns. But if we decide to keep fighting, we will never stop. Never. They do not know how to deal with an enemy that will not surrender. The next morning, they started walking again. On the 5th day, Priya collapsed. Her heart was fine, but her legs had developed stress fractures from the endless walking. Every step sent waves of pain through her body. She tried to keep going, but the bones were grinding against each other. James picked her up and carried her on his back. He was already exhausted, but he did not complain. On the 6th day, they saw the Kalori patrol ships. The ships flew high overhead, scanning the desert below. They were looking for the human team, looking for the data core that had been stolen from them, looking for revenge. YARA ordered everyone to take cover beneath an overhang of rock. They lay flat and still, barely breathing as the ships passed by. If the Kalori spotted them, it was over. The ships would call in more ships. The team would be captured or killed. Everything they had suffered would be for nothing. The ships passed by. They did not see the humans hidden in the rocks. On the 7th day, they ran out of food. They kept walking. On the 8th day, they ran out of water. They kept walking. On the 9th day, the shuttle came into view. It was small and silver, sitting on the cracked ground like a beacon of hope. The rest of the crew was there, waiting for them. They had been watching the desert for days, hoping and praying that their friends would return. When they saw the team approaching, they ran out to meet them. They brought water and food and stretchers for the wounded. They cried and laughed and embraced each other like family. Yara did not celebrate. Not yet. She waited until everyone was inside the shuttle. She waited until the engines powered up. She waited until they lifted off from the cursed ground of the singing wastes. Only then did she allow herself to smile. They had done it. They had walked 400 kilometers into hell and 400 kilometers back out. They had carried their wounded. They had left no one behind. They had done what the galaxy said was impossible, because they were human. And humans did not know the meaning of impossible. As the shuttle rose into the sky, Mark held up the data core. It was dirty and scratched, but still intact. Still holding the secret that the Kalori had tried so hard to steal. What do we do with this? He asked. Yara took the core and looked at it. Such a small thing. Worth so much blood. We show the galaxy what we really are, she said. We let them see us as we truly are. The shuttle broke through the atmosphere and into the cold beauty of space. Below them, the singing wastes continued their eternal song of death. But the humans were no longer listening. They were going home. The Galactic Concord met in a great hall at the center of the galaxy. Representatives from 300 species sat in rising rows of seats that circled a central platform. The hall was older than human civilization, older than most civilizations. Great decisions had been made here. Wars had been started and ended. The fate of entire worlds had been decided by votes cast in this ancient place. Today, they were here to discuss humanity. The Kalori delegation sat in the front row. Their leader, a scarred old warrior named High Commander Tethrak, watched the proceedings with angry eyes. His people had demanded this meeting. They wanted justice. They wanted the humans punished for stealing from them. Earth's ambassador was a woman named Adara Okonkwo. She was old and gray, but her eyes were sharp and her back was straight. She had been a soldier once, long ago. She understood what the team on the Singing Wastes had gone through. More importantly, she understood what it meant. The Concord speaker, a being of pure light named Luminax, called the meeting to order. We are here to address charges brought by the Kalori Dominion against United Earth. The Kalori claim that human agents stole classified research from a secure facility. They demand the return of this research and punishment for those responsible. High Commander Tethrak rose to speak. His voice was deep and filled with barely contained fury. The humans infiltrated our most secure research center. They stole data that belongs to us by right of possession. They killed 3 of our guards during their escape. And then they fled into the Singing Wastes, where they continued to evade our search parties. We sent 40 of our best soldiers after them. None returned. A murmur went through the hall. 40 soldiers lost. That was a significant number, even for a power as great as the Kalori. We demand justice, Tethrak continued. The humans must return what they stole, and they must pay for the lives they have cost us. Luminax turned to Ambassador Okonkwo. How does United Earth respond to these charges? Adara stood slowly. She did not look angry or afraid. She looked calm, like someone who knew something that others did not. The Kalori speak of theft, she said. But let me ask this honored assembly a simple question. Can you steal what was always yours? Tethrak's mandibles clicked with irritation. The research was in our possession. That makes it ours. The research was about human biology, about the limits and capabilities of the human body and mind. It was created by human scientists studying human subjects. The Kalori took it from one of our colony worlds during the border conflicts 10 years ago. They did not create this knowledge. They stole it from us. We simply took it back. The assembly murmured again. The Kalori had never admitted how they obtained the research. Now everyone knew. That changes nothing, Tethrak insisted. Possession is the law of the galaxy. We had it. You took it. That is theft. Adara smiled. It was a small smile, but it silenced the hall. Very well. Let us not argue about possession. Let us talk about what the research contains. Let us talk about why the Kalori wanted it so badly. Let us talk about the truth. She pressed a button on her datapad, and a holographic display appeared above the central platform. It showed images from the Singing Wastes. Images of human soldiers walking through impossible heat. Images of them carrying their wounded through killing cold. Images of them surviving conditions that had killed 40 Kalori soldiers. The Kalori wanted to understand human endurance, Adara said. They wanted to know why we can do things that no other species can do. They thought it was biological. They thought they could copy it. They were wrong. She pressed another button, and the display changed. It now showed scientific data, graphs, and charts that most of the assembly could not understand. But the conclusion was written in large letters that everyone could read. Human endurance cannot be replicated. Our scientists have spent decades studying this question, Adara continued. What makes humans different? Why can we push ourselves past the point where other species fail? The answer is simple, and it is impossible to copy. She paused, letting the silence build. It is choice. Tetheric made a sound of disgust. Choice? That is not science. That is philosophy. It is both. Human bodies are designed for endurance. That part is biology. Our ancestors hunted by chasing prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. We evolved to walk forever, to sweat instead of pant, to move efficiently over long distances. But biology alone does not explain what happened in the singing. Wastes. She gestured at the images, still floating above the platform. Those soldiers walked for 9 days, through conditions that killed your people in two. They ran out of food. They ran out of water. They carried their wounded on their backs. And they did not stop. Why? No one answered. Because they chose not to. Human minds can override our biological limits. We can tell our bodies to keep going when every cell is screaming for rest. We can ignore pain. We can ignore exhaustion. We can ignore the voice in our heads that says, give up. Other species cannot do this. When their bodies fail, their minds follow. When our bodies fail, our minds take over. She turned to face Tetheric directly. This is why you are afraid of us. This is why you tried to steal our research. You thought you could make yourselves like us. You cannot. Endurance is not a chemical. It is not a gene. It is a choice, made in the moment, to keep walking when everything tells you to stop. And you cannot copy a choice. The assembly was silent. Even Tetheric had nothing to say. Luminax spoke into the silence. What does United Earth want from this assembly? Adara straightened her shoulders. We want nothing. We do not seek punishment for the Kalori. We do not seek reparations. We simply want the truth to be known. We want the galaxy to understand what humans really are. And what are you? Adara smiled again. This time, it was the smile of a species that had walked through fire and come out stronger. We are the ones who do not stop. Not because we cannot feel pain. Not because we do not know fear. But because we choose to keep walking anyway. That is our gift. That is our burden. That is what it means to be human. She sat down. The assembly voted later that day. They dropped all charges against United Earth. They also revised humanity's endurance mark. For thousands of years, every species in the galaxy had been rated on a scale from 1 to 10. Humans had been rated at 7.2. The new rating was different. Where the number used to be, there was now a single word, unlimited. News of the decision spread across the galaxy. On 1,000 worlds, beings of every shape and size heard the story of the singing wastes. They heard about humans who walked through hell to rescue one of their own. They heard about the species that does not stop. Some of them laughed. Some of them doubted. But many of them, deep in their hearts, felt something new when they thought about humanity. Something they had never felt before. Fear. Commander Yar Chun did not attend the Concord meeting. She was back on Earth, standing in front of a class of young cadets at the military academy. They were the next generation of human soldiers. The ones who would carry the torch into the future. The galaxy has faster species, she told them. Stronger species. Smarter species. Species that live longer, see farther, think quicker. But none of them have what we have. A young cadet raised his hand. What do we have, Commander? Yara looked at him. She saw the fire in his eyes. The same fire she had seen in her team on the Singing Wastes. The same fire that burned in every human heart. We have the choice, she said. The choice to keep going when everything tells us to stop. The choice to carry our wounded, to never leave anyone behind, to walk through fire if that is what it takes. Other species are bound by their biology. We are bound by nothing but our own will. She turned and looked out the window. Earth spread out below them, green and blue and beautiful. The home of the species that does not stop. The galaxy is watching us now, she said. They are wondering what we will do next, where we will go, what we will become. They are afraid of us, even though they do not want to admit it. She turned back to the cadets. Good, let them be afraid, because we are just getting started. The cadets sat in silence, their eyes burning with pride and purpose. Outside, the sun set over Earth, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Somewhere out in the galaxy, the Kalari were rebuilding their search parties. Somewhere out there, other species were studying the footage from the singing wastes, trying to understand what they had seen. They would never understand. Not really, because understanding required experience. And no other species had ever walked the path that humans walked. No other species had ever chosen to keep going when there was no reason to hope. That was the human gift, the human burden, the human truth, and it would never be taken from them. Not ever. Not while a single human heart still beat. Not while a single human voice could still say the words that had carried them across the galaxy. Through fire and ice and death itself, we do not stop. We never stop. We will keep walking forever,